What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Coaching Business Blueprint. Had like a weird sinus infection-y thing going on for a while, so that's why my voice is kind of jacked up today. And I also haven't been on here in probably at least a month. And basically, I learned some stuff and had sort of a kind of a pumping of the brakes of the direction that I was going in with some of my positioning in my business. And this podcast is one of the things that I pumped the brakes on. I realized that even though I had made a commitment to do this every day for a year, it wasn't the highest and best thing that I could spend my time on. And so I paused it. But I do plan on being on here on some level of frequency kind of moving forward. So I wanted to apologize if I let you down by going back on my word. I always hate to do that, and I try to do that less and less. It used to be quite a big problem of mine where I couldn't stick to anything, and now I have gotten probably 50% better at it. But there's some times when I realize I made the wrong commitment and I have to sort of end up with egg on my face. And this was one of those times. One of the big epiphanies that I had, which I'll share with you today, it came from a guy named Dan Coe, who I discovered only sometime this year, a handful of months ago. And he has a pretty cool business model. I definitely recommend checking him out. It's Dan Coe, K-O-E. But he advocates for doing a lot of short form content. And just as a quick lesson, like the platforms like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok and Twitter and Threads. In other words, most of the platforms are short form content based. Like if you see somebody on Instagram, they're scrolling from one piece of content to the next, to the next, to the next. They don't engage with any piece of content for longer than about a minute. And it's especially true with like TikTok or Twitter. Short form content platforms. And whereas like, like nobody like full screens their phone and watches a 10-minute video on Instagram. It just doesn't happen nearly as often. And then you have longer form platforms, which are like this is a podcast, right? Like you expect this to be a little longer than a minute, right? A little bit more depth to the learning. And YouTube is another long form platform, although it has a short form element to it because they have shorts now, but it's primarily long form, or has been, since its conception. And like an email newsletter would be another example of a long form platform, long form content platform. And those are where you build authority and trust. Like you have to show people that you know something at some point. You can't just be writing quotes and memes and tweets and things like that. You have to actually show that there's depth to your ideas, and help people in a detailed way so that they're like, okay, wow, this is really good. If this person's putting this stuff out for free, I wonder what their paid course would be like. And where I feel like I went wrong, based upon what I learned from guys like Dan Coe, is I've been very heavily based in long form content. Growing a podcast, growing a email list, growing a YouTube channel, and not really putting out any short form content. Like if you look at my Instagram or my Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, there's basically nothing. Very inconsistent at best I'll slap a few reels up on Instagram every now and then or whatever, but I've just been Mr. Long Form. And so while that has benefit to it, because I can educate on a deeper level, build trust and authority with the people who already follow me, I'm not growing very fast, right? And so it doesn't really matter how good your content is if you're not getting eyeballs on it. And what Dan taught me is that short form is your mechanism for growth and testing ideas, and long form is where you deepen the trust and the authority. So I realized that I was missing out on the short form element of things and overly focusing on the long form. Sorry. Therefore, I pumped the brakes, and I'm working on I hired a video editor and a thumbnail creator for YouTube, which was taking up an unnecessary portion of my time. And now I'm in the process of finding a social media manager to help me create short form. Because the cool thing is that you can create a long form piece of content every week and then have somebody pull lots of short form things from that, 15-second clips from your videos, quotes and carousel posts from your newsletter. You could probably create 10, 15, 20 pieces of short form content easy from just one long form newsletter that you also make a YouTube version of. And that's what I'm looking to find, is someone to help me do that. So I have that piece in place for the growth of the brand before I kind of come back to doing a lot of the long form stuff like in the podcast. So that's where I've been. And I've also been doing a lot of dad stuff. We have a 3-year-old girl named Everly, and then we have another little girl named Lily who's 3 months old. And so shit's been a little wild at the house. My wife and I look at each other sometimes like, wow, we're in it right now, when they're both crying at the same time. But we're also mostly really grateful and appreciative for how sweet this phase is, and wouldn't trade it for the world. But work-wise, it's quite a bit. So been doing that. And that's kind of the update from my end. I hope that you got some gold nuggets out of my learnings and what is going on for me in terms of the short form versus the long form. But I'll be back hopefully on a weekly basis to provide you guys with some long form value. I may be putting like recordings of the YouTube videos on here. That may be coming at some point as well. That's something I've seen people do with success. You guys can opt into my email newsletter if you want to hear from me via email once a week and see the long form stuff that I'm creating. Thank you guys so much for being here and being patient for this next episode. I will be more consistent moving forward. You guys have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.